Yeah.
Based on the stuff that her mother has said, I get the feeling that no, Mom was not home.
Yeah, I get the feeling that they don't really know if she went home or if she just
Right.
was heading straight to the art gallery. Reportedly, she went home and changed her clothes from her school clothes to her going out clothes, and then was walking to her father's gallery. But
That would make sense.
She's
the
wearing
friends,
very clothes of the time, too.
yeah, and the friends didn't, I guess they must have called or something, but otherwise her parents found out that she hadn't shown up, and they thought, she's probably missing then.
Yeah.
And my sense is that they reported her missing in the appropriate time frame, and that, blah, 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 right? She was 17.
Yeah. So they reported her missing.
They did, yeah. And once that was kind of pushed out, some construction workers said that
Of course it was.
they were working on her route from her home to the gallery, and they saw her walk past, which is why I think they figured she had gone home.
It must
They
have been like
said-
city workers because they just stand around anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was wearing a denim miniskirt and cork heels, so they, I guess, were the last people to have seen her.
As a construction worker, you should be careful of just catcalling at every lady, because it might be the last person she sees.
Yeah, it's true.
And then you're going to be guilty
Yeah.
forever.
And I think I didn't mention this, but the road that she was walking down was a road called Main Highway in the neighborhood Coconut Grove, which is in Miami, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
It's often reported that she was hitchhiking along the road, but, like Joe said, it was a mile.
Not that far.
It wasn't
Why
that
bother hitchhiking?
far.
Yeah.
I know from reports from her brother, he said they hitchhiked around the neighborhood, and she particularly hitchhiked around the neighborhood all the time.
That's just what you did at that
Yeah,
time.
and her parents knew about it, and they were like, it's a friendly neighborhood, it's safe, it's fine for you to hitchhike around the neighborhood. But again, it was only a mile, so I don't really know. Maybe the heels were uncomfortable. I've certainly been in that situation before where I put on some new shoes because I, was feeling myself, and then started walking and was like, oh my God.
Or
Why?
maybe,
This is the worst.
or maybe she's walking down the road and somebody she knew just stopped by and said, "Hey, Amy, want to ride?"
Or even somebody she didn't know just pulled over and said, hey, do you want to ride down the road? And she was like,
this is,
yeah, okay.
This is the era when truckers are not scary.
Yeah.
They are, your long-haul taxi service.
Yeah. So a search at this point is conducted. It didn't come up with anything. The family and the people who knew Amy didn't feel like she had just left voluntarily, like she hadn't run away from home.
For the circus.
For instance, yeah. And as far as I can tell, the police seem to have done their job, though again, if this story is starting to sound familiar to you and you don't really know why that is, it's because it was an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Really?
And as happens with these cases, it ends up that most of the reporting is kind of whatever was in that episode.
A lot of people report that stuff as being fact.
Yeah,
a
well, not
reenactment.
only is it fact, but it also means that if they leave out big chunks of the story, those big chunks of the story tend to get lost to history.
Yeah. huh?
So we
Yeah.
don't know a whole lot about the initial investigation because Unsolved Mysteries didn't seem to give a hoot about it.
How many times have we talked about that?
We talk about it a lot. So
This is where actually you can actually be well served to get off the internet and go to your library and actually get a book about this stuff. 'Cause
Or
I've
look
done that
at-
in the past. You find a lot of stuff that you just can't find on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, or otherwise look at newspaper articles.
Oh yeah.
Or something like that is really, really great. I found a couple of newspaper articles that we had used the Wayback Machine for
Yep.
this one. That was helpful, but they were still from, the early 2000s. So nothing really from, well, there was one from like 95, but
Well, I was
nothing
going to say,
from the time.
even some of the older stuff that I found was very thin.
Yeah.
Because this was the time when kids started disappearing, and they were just they just ran away.
Yeah,
the reporting was
especially
always
at-
very light.
Especially at 17.
Yeah.
I think police often felt like, well, they just, they went away and
Yeah,
whatever.
she met a boy and
Yeah.
she chased him, and
Right.
sorry, Mom and Dad, but she's off happily
She's off.
living with the new boyfriend.
Yeah, but like I said, it does appear that the police did their job. There was a lot of reporting, at least in the Florida area, about her disappearance. A few days after her disappearance, a man who had heard about Amy's disappearance, I'm sorry I keep saying disappearance, turned in a camera.
Start using the word evaporation.
I like that. Yeah.
Evacuation, maybe. A man who had heard about Amy being missing turned in her camera, which he said he had found near the Wildwood exit off the Florida Turnpike.
I've always wondered about the camera thing. Was it labeled?
It actually was,
Oh,
yeah.
was it labeled?
It was
Okay.
right below the under the lens.
It
She
said
had her
Kodak?
name was written or something.
Okay.
Yeah, but it actually was.
Kodak keeps losing her
Yeah.
camera.
Yeah.
No.
What?
No.
But
Probably used one of those sticker machines that embossed your
Yeah, the one
Yeah.
the one like Bart Simpson had in that episode. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are not familiar with Florida, so like everybody, even most people who live in Florida,
Absolutely.
that exit of the turnpike is about 50 miles north of Orlando, Florida, which means that the camera was about 272 miles away from Coconut Grove. So it's not like, whoops,
That's a
on the
whole
way
big
to
drive.
the gallery, she dropped her camera. It's a big old drive.
Well, there's a perfectly innocent explanation. She probably pawned the camera because she did want money.
Yep.
She pawned the camera.
Because she was
Somebody
running
else
away.
lost it.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There you
No,
go.
and this does come with the caveat that it's really unclear if Amy had her camera with her when she disappeared, or if it had even maybe been stolen prior. Her parents, it sounds like, couldn't say, for a couple of weeks even, that they had seen Amy with the camera. So, maybe she did pawn it because she was 17 and felt like she needed more money.
She probably didn't pawn it. She
Maybe
wouldn't have
somebody
gotten
stole it
anything for
from
Yeah.
her a couple weeks before, but also
Or she
maybe
loaned
it was
to somebody, or
Right.
God knows what.
Or
yeah.
maybe it was connected to the disappearance. It's almost impossible to tell. 3 weeks after Amy went missing, Sue, Amy's mom, Sue, I've been calling her Sue the entire time, but I don't really know.
I think she
so
goes
I'm
by
really
Sue, or
sorry.
went by Sue. I guess she's dead now.
Yeah,
but,
she did pass away, but sorry if that's not it. Anyway, Sue got a call in the middle of the night, or I guess the Billigs did.
Ned and Sue.
Yeah, both of them have passed away, but Ned passed away in 1993. When the call started, they were both living together. Sue answered the phone, but it was dead air on the other end, so she hung up.
In other words, nobody there, not even the breathing.
Well,
somebody
no,
there,
it was
but
breathing.
just-
I mean,
yeah.
there
Or
could
was
have been
there-
breathing.
She could hear the breathing?
She didn't say she could hear the breathing, but it
Okay.
wasn't just like dial tone or anything like that.
Okay.
So after she hung up, a few minutes after that, the phone rang again. She answered, dead air. A few minutes after that, when Sue answered the phone because it was ringing again, she was pretty sure at this point that it was Amy calling.
From beyond the grave.
No, just like, to say, Mom, I love you, I'm safe, or something. I mean,
Or
anything.
Mom,
Trying
come
to
save me, come help
Right,
me. or-
exactly.
yeah.
So Sue started to plea with Amy. She was asking her to come home.
Because that's who she believes is on the phone.
Yeah, she's telling her she loves her, etc., etc., etc. This goes on for almost 5 minutes, at which point Sue decides, okay, she's not going to say anything, right? Amy's not going to say anything. I'm going to hang up. So she hangs up. And this goes on for a few weeks before the police get involved, which they did, which again leads me to believe the police were really doing their job.
Oh, yeah.
They started...
Florida. The police have to be on the ball down there. Right?
They sure don't.
Yeah.
So when they did get involved, they started tracing the calls and found they were coming from a phone booth, which they started staking out. Once they started their surveillance on this phone booth, however, the phone calls started coming from a different telephone booth.
How convenient.
Yeah, interesting. I know somebody
this-
must have had an in at the police department.
Yeah,
or
this
something.
game of cat and mouse went on for a while, and Sue was getting these like silent calls. They would
They were able to kind of figure out there was, I don't know, 4 or 5 phone booths that who the caller was.
Yeah, in like a
really,
certain kind of radius.
Yeah.
And it was pretty much like there were 4 or 5, and they would stake one out, and then they would still, all the while, still tracing calls, and and the call would come from a different phone booth, and they were just like, "Oh my God, what?"
But obviously this is not a big enough profile case to send cops to every one
Well,
of
I
those.
don't think they
and
had
just
the resources.
wait.
It would take him like months to make a call sometimes.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They could
So-
just stake it out.
Yeah.
Probably what it
after-
was is they were staking it out, and then the caller would just walk up and like put up one of those sandwich signs nearby where they could see it that said free donuts down the block or something.
No,
Yeah.
no, I know what actually happened. Let's continue here.
Oh,
Okay.
fine.
After 5 months of silent calls, the caller finally spoke. So Sue was getting these calls couple night at least. Pretty consistently at this point, there were just silence for 5 months. And then finally, the caller did identify himself as Hal Johnson and told Sue, "I have her." These calls continued for years, like we said, while while the police continued to search for Hal. They could not figure out which one of the booths he was going to make a call from. And as we said...
How long would she be on the phone with him? A minute?
A couple minutes. Sometimes it depends. She said, when the silent ones were happening, she would sometimes sit on the phone for 5 minutes of dead air. Like literally 5 minutes of dead air. But it seemed like she was always the one who hung up. It wasn't him, usually. So I don't really know.
It just seems to me like what they should have done was put in a second line. And then when he calls, just call the police right away. They just go hit all those phone booths all at once, and just bam, nab them.
You would think, but so here was the thing.
Not a high-profile case. They're not going to do that.
Well,
why not? They were staking it out. There was a lot of trouble. They went to a lot of trouble.
In the very, very beginning, yes. But I have a feeling that by this point, enough time had gone by that they had given up.
Well, so, I mean, they were also starting to suspect that Hal was able to identify their undercover cars. Because clearly, they would stake out any given one, and it just happened that he wasn't using that one. That's absurd. Yeah. They also, the other thing that's important here for people to know is that some nights Hal would call Sue literally like dozens of times in a given night, and then he would go months, sometimes 5 months, 6 months without calling her at all. So there was no real rhyme or reason, except for that whenever Sue was in the news locally, she could pretty much guarantee that Hal was going to call her.
He said some pretty horrible stuff, too.
Yeah,
I mean,
he kind of...
Nice.
What happened is the calls escalated, right? So we said for a good 5 months there was silence. Then for a couple months he would just kind of say, I have her, and, whatever. Then he told Sue that Amy was learning quickly and that she was his sex slave.
Just what a mother wants to hear.
Yeah, he got really, really explicit and a little weird. Some choice smoothed her out. She knows just how to please, and I can tell you she knows how to use her mouth just in the right way.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Again, just what a parent wants to hear.
Yeah. He eventually started tracing her movements even. He said that he was loaning Amy out to other men. He said that eventually he had, quote, sold her to the ragheads in Saudi Arabia, unquote.
And that's his quote.
His quote, not mine.
Sorry.
Where she had, quote, perfected her art, unquote.
Sorry about that, too.
I'm sorry about all of this. He detailed really awful things that are way worse than anything I'd ever want to say on this podcast. And these calls continued until 1993, which is 19 years of him just saying horrible, horrible, awful things. In 1993... it changed. You may remember we mentioned a few minutes ago that Ned, Sue's husband and Amy's father, passed away.
He died that year, didn't he?
In 1993. At which point, after Ned passed away, Hal, the first call that Sue got from Hal after Ned passed away was, he said, "You're all alone now, aren't you? You better watch your back."
Nice guy, again.
And then he started to detail some more stuff, basically saying that Hal said, "We want you," because apparently he was part of some, organization. I don't really know. But basically they, quote unquote, wanted Sue to join Amy because they'd gotten tired of Amy's age, which would have been 36 at the time.
Amy's age?
Yep.
I guess she would have been 36.
She would have been 36 at that time.
Yeah, enough. It really took that long.
That's right, it was 20 years.
Yeah, it was 20 years, yeah. So he said that everybody had gotten tired of how old Amy was, so they wanted a mother-daughter duo, and they wanted it to be Sue and Amy.
So Amy's too old, so Mommy will make it better?
Right,
Okay.
I don't really know. I don't really want to go into where that goes in the brain.
That's mostly
but
an a-hole just jerking her around.
Oh, God, it's really awful. Anyways, the FBI got involved at this point and helped the police track the person who'd been making these calls, because you may or may not remember, 20 years is a long time, especially in this time period and especially as it pertains to technology. So as Hal had started making these phone calls at phone booths, cell phones became a thing, and he started calling from a cell phone.
Smart move, dude.
Yeah.
No, never trace this.
Well, so the thing that's really interesting here is they almost might not have. The FBI used some it was a couple more years before the technology really, really caught up to the technology that Hal was using, but they finally were able to trace the cell phone number that Hal had been using for the last couple of years. Which, again, remember, tracing technology, all of that sort of stuff, that takes a while to catch up. So cell phones were a thing.
In an analog world, it's a slow process.
Yeah, so cell phones were a thing for a while before anybody could be tracing cell phones. The FBI was able to trace this cell phone number to an address, which the police went to check out. And it turns out the address was a federal drop site linked to the U.S. Customs. I know.
A federal drop site as in, what do you mean by drop site? Like a mailbox maybe, or?
No, I think it was just like a dead drop site, like, something that somebody would use to like drop off some packages behind a locked door or whatever. It's never really gone into. I'm just making an assumption here. But it was a physical address
I can
of
see that,
something.
yeah. Okay.
So,
all right.
So the police supervisor at this point, the FBI says, okay, well, we linked it to this address, go check it out. And the police go to check out the address and find out that it's this U.S. Customs thing. So the police supervisor calls the branch of the U.S. Customs that was registered to this. I don't know how he figured it out, but anyway. And he says, hey, I have this phone number I'm trying to trace. Can you tell me who it's linked to? And the supervisor says,
Take off, get out of here, you hoser.
he says, oh, none of your bleep bleep business, which I know.
You gotta love those feds, huh?
Yeah. So the police decide, you know what? We know what will make the supervisor cooperate, and that is we have a number of tape recordings that Sue took with the approval of a judge. A judge, years earlier had said, yeah, you can record these messages for perpetuity or for, voice recognition or whatever.
So they played them for the supervisor.
So they took them down
saying, do you
to the
recognize?
office.
Is this one of
it
your
wasn't even
employees?
just you're recognized, was it? It was just like listen to all of the really messed up stuff that this person has been dealing with for 20 years and recognize that a lot of them have been coming to a phone number registered to an address that you're in charge of. At that point, the supervisor said, okay.
Well, he didn't he say something like he called somebody else and he's like, I think I know who this is. It can't really be him, but I'm gonna get so and so to come listen too. Like they had multiple people listen to it because they couldn't believe it.
Right, but basically he just said, okay, yes, I'll cooperate. Yeah. You're right. It is your business.
My bad.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna talk about theories because I bet you want to know who that might have been on the tape.
Bad man.
We do want to know.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
It was Hank Blair. Is our first theory.
Okay.
It was Hank Blair. Yeah, so that's actually what happened is the supervisor said, boy, I hope that's not Hank Blair, but it
sounds
sure sounds a lot like
Hank Blair.
him. Yeah.
Just so you know, Hank talks to me just that way. He says, yeah, I got your daughter. I smoothed her out.
Yeah. Henry Johnson Blair is actually his full name. Come on. Didn't change your name very
Al
much,
Johnson.
did you?
Yeah, this guy is he was not careful at all.
No.
Yeah.
He was he's still alive, a U.S. Customs Squad leader. Well, he was. I'm sorry. He was a U.S. Customs Squad leader. He is no longer a U.S. Customs Squad leader. He is alive still. He had more than 24 years of law enforcement service under his belt.
So that meant that he started his Purdy phone calls when he was kind of a rookie police
He was 27.
officer.
He was actually he was an air marshal at that time. Which we'll talk about in just a second here. I just want to run through his kind of
makes you wonder about, do they give the air marshals any psychological testing or anything like
They
that?
probably do.
Do they give police? Do they give
picky.
police and U.S. Customs people psychological testing? Probably.
I thought they did.
But I mean, people
was
can
the 70s.
pass this stuff. It's fine. Yeah. He was highly decorated for breaking lots of different smuggling rings in Miami. Recovered lots of stolen masterpieces for the government of Spain. He owned a house in the suburbs. He was, your typical high-ranking government law enforcement official.
High-ranking middle management, at least.
Yep, he was at the time 48 years old. His wife was a top administrator at the South Miami Hospital. He apparently didn't even have a speeding ticket on his record. That's how clean he was.
Well, he probably pulled out his badge every time he got pulled over and said, I'm on official business.
Yeah.
So his law enforcement background obviously probably aided him in spotting these stakeouts at the phone
for
booth.
sure, yeah. He had 2 daughters. One was 20 and one was 17. He was basically everybody, he was that guy when the police came to take him away
Nobody
in
would've
handcuffs,
suspected.
everybody said, "Oh, he's such a nice guy."
Uh-huh.
But he was always such a nice, quiet guy. But there you go. He was arrested pretty much on site.